Afternoon here on Leadership Across the Table. We've got Cindy Schueman today, the Director of Impact Leadership here in Cookeville. A lot of folks that are probably watching this in Cookeville and the greater Cookeville region, those that are connected in the community, will likely know Cindy, and a lot of folks don't. And so we're really pleased that you're here today. Um, a Illinois Chicago native, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I think is interesting about you, Cindy, is we're so blessed. We have lots of folks that interact with our business from that are not Tennessee natives that maybe came here in the last 5 to 10 years. Um, Tell us a little bit about the story about what brought you from Illinois to Tennessee.
Well, that's pretty easy. My
Okay.
mother lived here,
Mm.
and she had heart bypass surgery and was allergic to one of the prescriptions that she had to take for 3 years. I'm sorry, 3 months. She was required to take it for 3 months, and because she was allergic to it, there was no substitute. It was deteriorating the lining of her stomach, and she could hardly eat. So she was wasting away. I came down here to make sure she ate and to get her out exercising. And I came thinking it was temporary, thinking it was 3 months. I kept saying, get better, I'm going back, there's nothing here.
Yeah.
And she said to me, why don't you get involved in the community to help bide your time?
And you did.
And I did, and that was 2011. I'm still here.
Yeah, so that was 2011, and and I could say a lot about that, but in general, our families should do more, as families, and that's a great example of an adult child stepping up, as a caregiver. There's over like 60 million unpaid caregivers in the United States, but that's largely what brought you to Tennessee for a parent. And you said you got involved in the community, and one of the reasons why we brought you today is part of the involvement, at least it evolved up to this impact leadership. Now, a lot of folks don't know what that is. I think one of my questions is kind of what's the background of impact and kind of what does that organization look like today?
Impact originally started, I teased them. I love these guys, Morris Irby, Dr. Rob Owens, and others, Walter Buck. I, I guess they kind of started having Saturday morning meetings. And Impact stood for Innovative Men Progressing African American Community Together.
Okay, so it was an organization that stood up to kind of really help bring in the African American community and develop leadership skill sets there. Would that be?
Yes.
Was that a local or more of a regional organization
Local.
too? So that was here local. That was formed. And when did that start?
Well, I think around 2010.
Okay. Okay.
Because they didn't have their first banquet for a couple of years, maybe 2012. And Dwight Henry and I went to the first banquet, and we walked out of there impressed with the organization. It was men that have leadership skills and brings to the table a lot of experience. Morris was in HR at Cummins Filtration. Dr. Rob Owens is at TTU.
Yep.
Mark Burnett was at TTU. And they decided that the Saturday meeting of black men could do more in the community. And they started a Man Up program and tutoring youngsters. And Rob Owens came to me one day and suggested that they needed more visibility in the community. And my comment to him was that the community events I had gone to, I didn't see many black people at, if any. But learning that there's quite a community of black people here. And I started to learn there were reasons for that. And I said, well, then maybe you need to educate to be able to do more integration. And I devised kind of a adult leadership program to educate, to integrate. But I worked with Dr. Bharat Soni. I don't know if you ever knew him.
No, ma'am.
And I worked with Dr. Michael Torrance. I worked with Mark Hutchins. And in developing adult education we formulated what is transformational thinking. And what it does, it's a process, and you have to trust the process. But what it does is it brings an adult to a self-awareness, which allows them to realize other adults having self-awareness, that their individuality is so unique. Nobody else is like them.
Every individual.
Every individual.
This is all part of the impact too. We're talking still about the impact organization. Yeah, okay.
No. That's all impact leadership now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't make that clarification.
Yeah.
So what happened is I went back to Dr. Owens and I said, you need to educate these adults. So let's call it impact leadership. You need to educate the community. Well, transformational thinking requires an aspiration. So the aspiration, the goal, obviously, was that the Black community needed to be more integrated into the Cookeville community.
That was the overall mission statement. Would that be fair, or part of the mission statement
of impact leadership?
The further integration of these different communities,
yes.
Specifically the African American community with the greater Cookeville.
Right.
Okay.
But Dr. Soni said we have the Asian community, we have the Hispanic community, we have the marginalized. And it was amazing because what impact leadership did then, which is an offshoot of impact, completely.
Two different organizations.
The same but different.
Okay.
Okay. We said we were not exclusive for African American. We were inclusive of anyone. I don't care if there's a community of redheads. Anyone and everyone, in developing the process and showing each individual adult through Myers-Briggs, through Gallup Strength Finder, through the process of transformational thinking, I was amazed to watch the light bulbs. The chandeliers just light up.
What are some of the things so part of it is helping folks be more self-aware and recognize all of our individual biases and things like that can stop the integration process? Is that kind of what's going on through the classes and things like that?
Yes.
Walk us through an example of how.
Well, okay. Here's an example. Colin Woodard wrote a book called America's Nations. And in there, he talks about regionalism. And I give 13 paragraphs to the class. I tell them to read the paragraph until they find the one that describes their region.
Okay.
Nobody fails.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
I brought them. I can show them to you.
Yeah.
Nobody fails when they get to the section that talks about the Appalachian mindset. Everybody said, got it. Got it.
What is that mindset, the Appalachian mindset?
Well, the many stereotypes seem to apply to the Appalachian mindset. The Hatfield and McCoy, the clannish mindset. One of the biggest positives of the Appalachian mindset region is patriotism. And the number of people that enroll, that volunteer for the armed services. It's the highest.
The volunteer state, right?
It's the highest in the country. And those would be definitely the positives. Of course, some of the negatives are there's not a lot of value in education, especially higher education. And ignorance kind of breeds its own kind of clannishness. But when they get to that paragraph and they get it right, then the next step is there's a book called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Hans has died in 2022, I think. But he was a doctor at the University of Bern and collected data for the United Nations on world health. And he would collect this data and come back and give his incoming class a quiz. And the quiz tests people on their perception of animals that are going extinct, on countries that have the highest baby mortality, countries that have no electricity, countries that have extreme poverty. And the questions are easy and everyone fails it, including my classes. And they fail because, and National Geographic is a wonderful magazine, but everybody lives in the 1950s and 60s of National Geographic, and they see the African tribes where they walk 10 miles to water carrying buckets on their...
those images are still omnipresent.
Yes, and they think that Africa is still a third world country, and third world countries don't exist anymore. And so once you show adults that their perception is wrong, then you can whittle in and say, your perspective is your passport or your prison.
Perception's reality. You always hear that quote, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so true.
And so if it's your passport or your prison, where do we go from here? And then there's more steps.
Yeah, and so how long, if an adult here in the Cookeville community, and you had, and I knew about impact leadership. We had a discussion previously, saying, hey, like other folks are in this. You should check it out and go through it. How long is the course, so to speak?
9 months, one day a month.
1 day a month. Okay, so it's not every week. It's once a month. It's a deep dive monthly for 9 months.
Yes.
That day, is it how long would that day be in the month? Is
8
it
to 5.
Okay.
The
So
only
it's
day that is extremely long, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is the day we go to Nashville.
Okay.
We go to the Hill. But every day is divided in 2 segments, morning and afternoon. One segment is typically a field trip, and the rest of the other segment would be education. And we do leadership training, so skills training. We do Myers-Briggs and Gallup Strength Finder. We do nonprofit board training. Teaches you your responsibilities and liabilities of sitting on a board.
This is really interesting. So it sounds like part of the perception, the self-awareness, just that early education then evolves into some hard skills we're going to learn here too. About just general leadership and being an advocate, and for those folks that are leaders in the community, how you should burden that, and take on that mantle, specifically with this nonprofit training. So is that part of what happens in Nashville on one of those 9 sessions, or?
No.
Okay.
Nashville is the only day that is a field trip all day.
Okay, that's outside of Cookeville.
We go to the World Affairs Council. We go to currently Ryan Williams and Senator Paul Bailey's office.
Okay.
We get a tour of the Capitol. Eddie Weeks, the historian of the Capitol, gives us a presentation. Sometimes the security at the Capitol will give us a tour.
Yeah.
We have lobbyists who come in and talk to us about what lobbyists are doing and
how it works. Really fascinating. When is the next class for any folks that are watching that are interested in gaining further leadership skills?
They can go to impactleadershiptn.com. The application is online. The class starts in August and goes until May of 2026.
Okay. And is there a cap on this? On the number of folks that enroll?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Are there vacancies? Might be a better question for the August.
Yes, there are.
Okay.
We like a class to be around 25, less than 30.
Okay.
It's manageable, and we like people to get to know each other. And when you have too many, that becomes a challenge. There is another aspect of our program that a lot of other places don't do, but has also garnered us some misperceptions.
Okay, you can talk to that if you'd like. Yeah.
We do deep dive topics, and by deep dive topics, we talk about issues that can be controversial.
Yeah.
And we present that every issue has multiple perspectives. So, for example, abortion.
Yeah.
Abortion has about 7 different perspectives. And so
there's some very progressive, very conservative, and then there's moderate viewpoints, I guess, on that too, that are in the middle.
So we hand out what those different perspectives would be.
Yeah.
Homelessness, poverty, abortion, critical race theory, is war with China inevitable, nuclear
catastrophe. Yeah.
School shootings.
Why are what are all really critical topics in society? What's some of the negativity that's
well, a lot of people listen to certain narratives.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. And don't ever bother to find out the truth.
Yeah.
So somebody said that we teach critical race theory.
Okay. Which has very strong images and perceptions in the public consciousness, right? Yeah.
Well, especially, so I asked somebody who is an elected official in this area what their views of critical race theory were, and the person responded by saying it's evil, run the other way. And I thought, that's your definition? You can't discuss something that you can't define. You can't. So the definition of critical race theory is that it's a theory, number one. Number two, it was posited by the Washington Post in a weekly series by a journalist who had a point of view. That's all it is a point of view.
And if I could comment too, Cindy, one of the things I'm sitting here thinking, I'm a very religious person. I'm a very socially conservative person. I have a very defined view on certain things in my life. I'm very interested in the course. I think part of this is people actually need to know counter arguments and concepts of things that if they've not dug into them seriously. One thing that bolstered my faith, for instance, I went through a series of years through my collegiate years in my early 20s where I totally lost my religious faith. Actually, what brought me back to my values was because I had to look at not my parents' faith, but what do I believe? And part of that was looking at many different worldviews. Secular worldviews, Eastern philosophies, and then back to Christianity, and why do I believe what I believe? Part of the ignorance, I think, is whether people want, if we want to make statements about critical race theory or not, is part of what this impact leadership is doing is we're going to spend 8 hours going through things that are very controversial, that could be abortion, or it could be school shootings. What is the threat of a war amongst the two greatest multipolar powers, and what does that mean for humanity? People need to really be aware of the echo chamber of our minds and know that you need to feel strong in your opinions. That means you need to know that topic in depth before you come to an opinion.
Yes.
Is that kind of what you're saying too?
Absolutely.
It is a point of view, and that's part of that self-awareness again. Because once you are aware, then you will fully know your view.
Yes, and not only that, but look at it this way. There's so many points of view here.
Yeah.
We are all diverse. Gallup has definitely proved that. In hundreds of millions of their assessments, they have calculated that 1 in 33.5 million people think the same way you think. Now, that means there might be 9 other people in the United States that think the way I think. And they categorize 34 markers of thought. 34 markers, they categorize them. They give you your top 5. If you can find even another person with your same top 5, but then tell me, are they the same gender?
Yeah.
Are they the same race? Are they the same religion? Did they grow up in the same neighborhood? Do they have the same kind of parents? Did they go to the same school? Are they equally educated? Are they equally as athletic? There are so many unconscious
Yeah.
contributors to make you who you uniquely are that no one else is like you. We are so diverse that to throw out the word diversity is insane to me. We are all so diverse. Now, if we don't do inclusion, that means exclusion. Exclusion is the root of everything that goes wrong.
Yeah. It's never the answer. Yeah.
It is not the answer.
Yeah.
So inclusion is another word.
Why is that so hard too? It seems like it's the answer sometimes. You know, I feel like that's the human default sometimes is let me gather in my similarity, right? And yeah.
Yeah.
What makes you so? How long have you been doing this?
10 years.
Okay. What makes you so passionate about continuing on? You know, I can tell. You know, that you really like what you do, and it sounds like this has been successive every year. What keeps you going?
I majored in cultural anthropology. I lived with the Amish for 20 weeks.
And that could be a whole other that could be a whole other segment probably.
It impacted my life so categorically. The one sentence that I can say is that there's a theological umbrella for Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
There's a separate theological umbrella for Catholicism.
Yeah.
And yet a separate theological umbrella for Anabaptists, which are Amish, Mennonite, Brethren, and Quaker.
Yeah.
So when Nickel Mine, an Amish murder happened, Nickel Mine was their school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. If you're not Amish, you're English. When the English stainless steel milk truck driver that went to all the Amish farms and collected the milk, all those children knew him.
Mm-hmm.
He pulled into the school. The Amish are not required to go to federal schools.
Right.
So he pulled into their private school, and he went in and he told the boys he was looking for some part to his truck. And the children said they hadn't seen it. I mean, the Amish children are so respectful.
Yeah.
And so obedient.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I've got some boxes out in my truck. Go bring them in. And the boys carried in these 3 boxes. Nails, hammer, wood, tape, a gun, different things. The boys carried them in. Well, the 2 teachers in the building thought something is wrong. They went out the back door. Amish children don't learn English until they go to school, so they speak Pennsylvania Dutch
In the home. Yeah, yeah.
So there was one little girl that didn't speak any English when Charles Carl Roberts told the boys, leave the building, but made the girls stay. One little girl ran out with the boys because she just didn't know. These boys went running through the field to go to their farm, the closest farm, to get a parental help, not knowing that the teachers were already on their way out calling the police. Police showed up within 6-7 minutes, and he'd already boarded a couple of windows, locked the doors, tied the girls up, shot 10 girls in the head, then shot himself.
Never heard that one. Whoa, horrible.
When all the Amish, hundreds of Amish, came to Charles Carl Roberts' funeral, a newscaster asked one of the Amish men, he just shot 10 of your daughters in the head. Why are you here? And he looked at her and he said, do the English forgive differently than the Amish? And the answer is yes, they do. It's innate, it's ingrained, it's because they go to church to be like Christ. We go to church to worship Christ. And just in that difference, is a huge theological behavioral difference. Huge.
Yeah, lot to say there. And so, it's just those experiences that have really led you to this when you moved here and mom sparked your interest to get involved, and you have, and thank you so much for sharing all this. A lot of folks do not know about the organization, so thank you for sharing all of that. I would like to leave you with a closing question. If you had to define leadership or talk about what's one of the best leadership traits that you see in other leaders, what would you say that is?
I don't think it's an easy question. It's pretty complex, but
Yes, it is.
but to be honest, the best leaders are the leaders that care about everybody, that treat people with dignity, respect, that they have a voice, that they are part of the community.
Sounds like I'm hearing kindness and compassion are
Yes.
some of the top.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting because the first year of the class, I had some atheists come up to me and say, we feel excluded in the Bible Belt. The second year, I had some homosexuals come up to me and say, we feel excluded in this community because it's such a Bible Belt. The third year, I mean, every year, I have different marginalized people saying they don't feel part of this community. And it's different regionally than it is other places. So I really encourage people to travel to other areas. I want to say one more thing.
Sure.
The reason self-actualization is so important, and knowing the 3 pillars to get there, and the 2 steps are self-esteem and then self-actualization, is because when you reach self-actualization, this is part of Maslow's hierarchy, when you reach self-actualization, you realize that what you have is no good to just yourself, that it's part of the community.
The greater community,
It's giving. It's always giving. It's always giving.
Yeah.
Which is why inclusion is never ending and exclusion is.
Yeah. Well, we'll end on that note. That is, thank you so much for coming today, Cindy.
Thank you.